Namaste. Welcome, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Tyldwick Tarot, episode 11. And today's going to be an interesting one. We're going to talk about the number 8 and try to weave the number 8 into the energy of justice. But before we get to the 8s, I want to have a look at the mirror cards in this deck and see if we can come to some sort of thread that connects all of the cards that have mirrors in this deck. The mirror is a powerful symbol, and I think one worthy of taking a moment just to reflect on these cards. There's one other, the moon card as well too, which fits for other reasons into this series so beautifully. I'll put that out in just a moment. Yeah, so welcome. My name is Sadhana, for those of you that are new, and I'm a tarot reader and just really love these deep dives. It just gives us time to sit and ask and reflect. And for those of you that are working with the tarot as personal self-reflection, really getting to know what is going on, individually with our lives. It's such a wonderful tool. So welcome to my channel, and thank you as always for your support. It's been so many kind comments lately. I'm just humbled. So thank you. Clevis, namaste. And Arya, namaste. Tamian, namaste. Welcome to all of you. So mirrors. Mirrors, they are potent symbols. They are used in magic. They are used, I was going to say it's a symbol of vanity. It's a symbol of, isn't it also called a vanity, right? A mirror. And I think as well to reflective ponds, looking into waters, scrying as well. So scrying might also play into this conversation as well. Namaste, Perry. So just sit for a moment here and think about these cards. The first one on the left is the Fool. And we see a clouded mirror and a harlequin pattern. We see a harlequin within the mirror, or I don't know, is it the spirit of that clown, or is it really there? I'm looking at the clarity of the mirrors. I think that is a key here. The one that is the most clear is the Justice card. So that will fit well into today's conversation. The clarity. It is, if you look at all the mirrors and compare them, just as far as how well you could see your own reflection. Certainly the Justice card has the clearest mirror. And we are looking in this deck at the furniture, the way that it is set up, its ornateness, its steadiness, its solidness, the number of drawers, the things that also are upon the table or over the mirror. All of these things will play into the interpretation, and you may pick up on something different in any given reading and allow that to come through. So yeah, the Fool, this mirror, and within the mirror of the Fool there's a scene. There are mountains. I mean, you can look deep into that mirror and perhaps see the landscape that you would see in a Waite Smith tarot. And it really plays on the history of the Fool card and the many iterations of the Fool that we have seen through the centuries with this card. And when I look at these cards, and there's something about the stark whiteness of, I think it's a mantelpiece. I think it's over a fire. I'm not too sure. Could be a table. But there's something about how white that is really standing out to me. And, I may also go back and look at the ornate legs. Which cards have ornate feminine legs? And why would the Justice card have this feminine energy about it. You know, it's not solid and square. We've seen lots of rooms and furniture where things are very solid and very square. So that's something to think about, because the number 8 is one that is very square. And we have something very, very feminine here. So we can sort of take that apart as we go through. And I believe we did briefly contrast the devil with another card or two already. But if you look also at the size of the mirror, that also says something, don't you think? The bigger the mirror, the more we can see of ourselves. The mirror of death perhaps is the largest of the mirrors. It's not a full-length mirror, but it is cloudy. It is dark. It's also, and I don't know, I'm sure there's a word for it when mirror and glass ages. And there may be slight cracks in it. There's I don't know if it's a patina effect or what you would call it, but it ages and you can no longer see clearly. The reflections become obscured in some way. So going back, the devil mirror is small and it's dark. I wonder if there is less of a willingness to look into that mirror. And then there is a bit of lightness, I think, in the moon. And as I'm looking at these cards now, the Justice and the Moon card appear related in some way with their lightness of, I was going to say lightness of being, their lightness of color. So as I was looking at the door cards and the mirror cards, and it's really interesting because I think there is a lot more intention in this deck than meets the eye. So perhaps put these cards to the side and just think about this and think about mirrors and what or how they may be useful for self-discovery. Hello, Heather. Welcome. Yeah. Okay. Size of the mirror, cloudiness of the mirror, age, or age of the mirror. So specifically looking at the Justice card, which is number 8, classically number 8 in the tarot. And again, these feminine legs I find very intriguing. We also have flowers and vases. And we do see the scales of justice. There is no sword. We see a church, a little tiny chapel, ornamental, what would you call an ornament? Like an ornament of a chapel, something you might have out maybe at Christmas time on a table. It's really beautiful when you zoom in and look at it there. Justice, I think justice wants us to see clearly. Justice wants us to have a good look. And I think the trouble with justice is that the mirror can never be quite large enough. It is a very special soul who has the gift of being able to discern the picture from a wider angle. And there's something here about the size and the clarity of this mirror. There's an invitation. It could be a model of family property. It could be a model of family. Oh, yes, that is true. The church, the chapel you're talking about. Yes. That is true. And I wonder, we do have a monastery on this property or within this deck. We have a lot of old buildings, and I wonder if this chapel, that's a really good point, did stand at one time on, shall we call it the Tyldwick estate? Yeah, or it could be a chapel that was important to the owners of the estate. Perhaps it was the chapel where the owners were married, or their children were christened, or it has some emotional value. A chapel would indicate some sort of what is like a sacrament, like one of those stages of life, a milestone that one passes through. Perhaps in a way, I'm thinking, christening and baptism and marriage and that's interesting, because then I think of the word vow. I think of vows that are associated with each of those. I believe vows are taken in all of those situations. And what is a vow? Let's go to some of the other comments. So Tamian says a life cycle event. And then Arya says church is where traditionally most moral laws were promulgated and even enforced. There's something something about this deck as well too, that when there's some things in the deck that make me feel small, almost overwhelmed, and this is just a little chapel on the table. It feels sentimental to me in a way. It feels sentimental, and that chapel might represent something today and something else tomorrow. So be open to whatever it is wanting to reveal to you. So I want to go back and just reflect on the idea of the mirror and discernment and justice, and adjustment and karma. And the thing about this card that is so challenging when it arises in a reading is that sometimes it shows up and we feel like, yes, thank goodness, justice will be served. Things will work out in a way that I believe are just. But the trouble is that we always don't have enough information. And sometimes we don't understand why the cards fell the way they did, because we can't understand the ripples in every direction that fall around us. So when a law is passed, or when something major shifts in the in our culture and our society, and like when Roe versus Wade was overturned, that, let's use that as an example, okay? So that was a huge knife in a lot of people's hearts, to think that something that people fought long and hard for, to fathom that still in 2023, women don't have that right. It's unconscionable. And yet there is a huge body of people who believe morally it's not. It is not uh, it's not something that humans can decide. It's up to God to decide. So it's these situations. So my where I am personally right now, when these sort of things arise, and I am quite literally taken aback, or something political or um, socio-demographically is so upsetting that it quite literally, I can feel it in my throat, I can feel it in my stomach. I cry, the tears arise. All I know is that at this time, I don't know the whole picture. I must trust. I must trust that this is a stage, this is a step, this is part of the process, the unfolding of life, of human nature. And there may be people who have the dharma to continue the fight to restore Roe versus Wade. But that's not where I am right now. Where I am right now is this place of step back, sadhana, step back, step back. How far back can you go? Silence to me really helps when we have these difficult moments of justice. I want to see what Perry has here. Perry says punishment is not really punishment is not really the justice that is fulfilling the needs of healing and creating a healthy life forward. Right. So our judicial system is it's very Kali Yuga. Some of you might know what that means. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are in a very low frequency time. Yeah. For those of us who are deeply connected to our spirituality, our individual practices, individual prayer, individual work is so important. And those few people that you may mentor, that's where your body of work and change can happen. One moment, one person, these ripples have powerful effects, and we need to have faith in that. And my hat is off for those of you that have the energy and the commitment and the dharma, right? You feel it is your life purpose to follow some of these causes through, and energetically I support you fully. The mirror is clear. It's interesting that it is not, it is it reflecting anything? Just a sec, I need to look at it. My question here is it reflecting anything, or is it completely, yeah. So we're not seeing a reflection in the mirror. The mirror is there for you to look into. I think there's something about the lilies as well too. Lilies are well, flowers in general have so many connotations. So you take the association that resonates with you, but lily as a it's got powerful connotation. Also, lilies I think are connected to weddings and funerals. They're a long-lasting flower. They do well in bouquets, right? Tamian. Sometimes the Justice card feels energetically more like a pendulum than a scale. Energy swaying back and forth in equal amounts. So that, Tamian, fits in so beautifully with the fact of with the number 8 energy. And if we think about the number 8 as 4 plus 4, I'm going to move these cards to the side right now. So if we think of the number 8 as 4, this is 18, the moon. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, it is. Okay. 8 as 4 plus 4. 4 is 2 plus 2. This is a number of where when we look at 4 plus 4 and we look at the solidity, the structure that is built with that, it's really interesting to look at 8s as 4 plus 4. It's like that next layer, that next level of the building beyond beyond the foundation. There's a sturdiness, there's a mightiness to the number 8, and it is also the lemniscate energy. It is that flow of energy. And one of my favorite diagrams is the one where you lay out the entire major arcana in the lemniscate figure 8, mirroring the 11 cards on each side, and looking at the cards that mirror each other in that pattern. It's a really beautiful reflection. And to understand that 1111 reflection, what does it do? It sort of morphs that energy of the hardness of the 4-4. So are you with me? So 8 is 4 plus 4. But when you lay out the 22 cards for the major arcana in a lemniscate pattern, you have 11 on each side and you have 2 that cross over in the middle. So it's really it's change for sure. It's change. And on many levels, it is change. This number 8, this Justice card. Change is imminent. Now, in what way? So if I think of 8 as the 8 major points on a compass, or the wheel of the year, there's something to this number that is wanting us to evolve, to grow, and to flow. The energy is shifting. If you, I want to go back to, because I know Heather commented as well too. You know, and when I read that, I think about how the different, so yuga are the ages, through a yogic perspective, the different ages of, it's like if you think of Western civilization, like the Bronze Age and the different ages, right? And these ages are different timings and different energies, but in Indian culture, it's looked at in the same kind of way. Some ages are dark and some ages are light or lighter. And we swing between the dark ages and the lighter ages through all of the history of mankind. And I've read lots of different books about Lemuria and the age of Lemuria and the age of Atlantis and the destruction of Lemuria and the destruction of Atlantis and the fall, right? The fall of great kingdoms. And life swings back and forth. And so when the Justice card comes up in a reading, there's a tremendous amount of humility, I think, that is necessary here. And the other thing for me is I want to remember that the mirror also is the micro macro thing. So when I find myself in tears over a perceived injustice in the macro, I want to take time to journal and reflect on the micro as well too, because it is so true. And I know all of you know this, and sometimes we just forget. And sometimes when we are most tumultuous inside, it is the same way outside. And that can also be with the weather. It's so interesting to sit with that. Now, when we're working with Marseille, Tarot de Marseille, and there's certainly a component of that in this deck, we, rather than looking at the major arcana by association, by reduction, we look at the second number. And so that's why I have the moon here as well too. So we have 8 and 18. 8 and 18. And if you look at the moon as an 8, it's really interesting to reflect on what I was talking about. So the Sabbats, the cycles, the flow of energy and the seasons, the directions, and how changeable the moon and the moon cycles are, and how we can be just 2.5 days and there we go into another sort of energy. And this card for me is going to take on a whole new, I've tried to play catch up with Julia Cuccia Watts's work, body of work on true sky astrology. And this is really rocking my boat. And in true sky astrology, we're looking at the stars as they are in the sky, and one's natal chart is slightly different than in Western tropical astrology. And this is another example for me of mirror work, flexibility, change, visions, seasons, learning and growing, all of these things. Heather offers these two cards also feel very much like a balance of divine masculine and feminine. Yeah, I love how there appears to be a moon in gray mirrors reflection. It's, I wonder, Heather, also, I just had this idea that a full moon was shining in through a high window in the distance, and we can see the room is lit because of the moon. Wouldn't that be beautiful? If you want to build in other associations that you have learned, why not sit with Justice, the Libra card, Air, Queen of Swords, Cardinal Air, 2, 3, and 4 of Swords. And then you can look at the moon, Pisces, end of the zodiacal year, a closure of sorts. And it's like the Justice card is a gateway that, I know it's not halfway across, 180 degrees across. Let's see, so that's October, November, December, January, February, March. No, it's not. They're quite close together. But I don't know what the degrees are, the relationship between these two, but I bet there is something zodiacally very interesting about the relationship. So those of you that know your angles on the chart, have a look at the relationship between these two cards I bet there's something there that that fits beautifully. So justice is cardinal, right? It leads. It is initiatory. It what could you build in there? Oh, here's another thing. So how about if and I don't know how to articulate this. It's like it invites us out of something. And in the moon card, we are invited into something. It's like they flow into each other in some way, from and to. One is gold, one is silver. And there is an opposite here. So I was talking about the ornate legs in the Justice card. It feels kind of feminine. Whereas the moon card, there's a squareness in that picture, which would be more masculine. But the moon is, and I'm going to bite my tongue because I was about to say the moon is feminine, but not in every culture. But in tarot, usually we see the moon as goddess energy. And Lady Justice is often feminine as well too, but there is a reflection of the gold and the silver. This deck, I think, asks a lot. If you take your time, and let, sometimes I will, in a reading, I'll do something like this, especially if I'm by myself. I'll pick up cards and I'll imagine they're talking to each other. They're looking at each other. Sometimes I do that just by turning the cards around, playing with the angles of the cards. It's so interesting. Yeah. Okay. So let's go back. 8. 8 it's a really important number. And here's another thing. 8. 8 is the number of the first decan of Pisces. So you know that thing I was saying, one, you go out of one and into the other. Well, moon is 8, 9, 10 of cups, if you're looking at it Golden Dawn way. So not only is this an 8 by the number of the major, its first decan is 8. So there might be something there. But I want to look at the minors, and I don't know if I can weave this for you. We do have a wheel. We do have a wheel of change in this one, and we have a contrast of something which is round and something which is square. This is the 8 of what's it called in this deck? Staves, right? 8 of staves. And it's interesting that there's feathers on the arrows. And I'm doing a lot of work reading these days, trying to wrap my head around playing cartomancy and the history of how these minor suits have evolved and the range of elements that have been associated with many of these suits. And there's something about arrows here. Arrows and the first suit. And this conversation about, which is first, fire or air. But this is often a card of messages and things moving quickly, and aren't messages delivered through the medium of air? Exactly, Heather. Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, some of my responses are a little slow because the chat doesn't appear on my end immediately. Forgive me. Yeah. So I think something here too about the red dot in the center of that bullseye is significant. And one word, and I don't know where or how you might weave this in, but focus. Focus has been an important insight for me in the eights. So the Sephra Hod, often connected with the intellectual. But in general, just thinking about a bunch of eight of swords, sorry, eight of wands. And then I don't have the wildwood. I actually ruined my wildwood deck. I spilled liquid all over it. It's presently drying over there on a table. It might be the eight of air in that deck where all of the arrows are flying in every direction. And I think the invitation here, regardless of what we're sort of looking at, is that there's a focus that's required. Think of all of the eight of wands that you know, Waite-Smith inspired. And we're often thinking about, well, are they going up? Are they coming down? There's a lot to this. The intensity of the archer and the focus that is required to shoot an arrow and send a message. And I don't know. I think focus is really important here. Think about that game. You know, that game you played as a child, or maybe if you're old like me, we played it at party games with adults and children, where you would, a telephone game, I think it's called, and you whisper a message in somebody's ear and then you pass it on. And it takes tremendous concentration for that message to be delivered clearly to the end of the line or around the circle. And you know, in that playing that game, some people intentionally mess it up, but focus is really important. Yeah, it makes me think of just when I think about emails and text messages, the thought and the preciseness and the we must be careful with our words. We must be careful. We can't be imprecise with language. And if you think about that in terms of the Justice card and how important language is with justice, how when words are misaligned, that a case can be thrown out, things like that. And just that whole idea of justice, Lady Justice with the sword and swords and words, the switching of that anagram, and so I think it's interesting that we have arrows in this card. Focus, focus. The Eight of Cups, this card, there's a bunch of tools. There's a cracked wall. We see an interesting arrangement of 5-3. I love cards where there's we can do that, because invariably in a reading I'm going to be looking for a 5 card over here and a 3 card over here to see if there's any 5s and 3s, because 5-3 is a kind of unusual configuration of 8. When 8, I think of 4-4 or 2 + 2 + 2 + 2. And this is 5-8. This is 5/8, 5/8 in sewing. 5/8, 5/8 of an inch used to be such an important measurement. All these little things maybe something will come through for you. And yeah, it's a potting shed, and there's lots of tools there. There's a sword, there's a spade, there's all kinds of things. There's resources that are available. And don't be too quick to turn this into a Waitsmith Eight of Cups. I want to, there was something that kind of, you can hear my voice. I think some of the descriptions in this PDF are a little, they're kind of a cop-out. I hate those little white books that just repeat, there's no great insight in them. But I want to pull it up. I just want to just refresh my, before I speak, I don't want to speak too soon. So yeah, it's a short description. It says 8 pots in a deserted shed. Note the symbols, the stave in the spade or hoe, the cross of the swords in the fork, the coins in the sieve. Your time here is finished. Clean and stack the tools, tidy the shed, and go on to the next place or project. Okay, here's another idea. What if this is the end of the season? It's the end of the gardening season. We are preparing for winter, and so the pots are being stacked in the shed to dry. The dirt's been taken out of them, and the tools are being put away and nicely stacked so that they also have space so they won't rust over the winter. I mean, in that way, we could describe this as a change, as that lemniscate energy. It's time. It's time to move on because things are changing. We are in the suit of emotion, energy in motion. And I think it's so we're in a garden shed. It's a very sort of coins, pentacles kind of energy, right? It's an earthy energy. It's sometimes in this card like this card this is a big card. When this card comes up, and I feel a lot of I've had so many readings where this card is a heavy hitting card. Heavy hitting card. It's often confirming, and yet at the same time, it's hard to swallow. I agree, Heather. These cards are so inspiring. Keeping order and preparing for the changes that are inevitable. And let's go back to the ripple effect thing. So when we prepare for change, think about the new year, the cleaning, the organizing. Some people do that at springtime. Other cultures do it at the new year. There's preparation for the change. Or if you think about all of the Sabbats, or even, festivals and spiritual holidays or shifts of energy in all cultures around the world, they don't just happen. There's preparation that goes into them. There's food that needs to be prepared, rooms and props and tools and so this idea of change is one of work. And often the more work, the more energy that you put in, often, you will, the greater, it's a physics law, right? Energy in equals energy out. Yeah. Okay. 2 more. This gets kind of, let's see, what should we have on the table here? Let's just put these ones here, this one here. I want to have these up. Where or why? I think we talked about this in the very first episode. I had some theories, but I'm going to ask it again. Where on the Tyldwick estate would you find barbed wood, barbed wire? Why? Why in a country garden estate would there be barbed wire and a bricked wall like this? Yeah, I want to comment on this before we'll go back to the barbed wire in a minute. I've lived in a few different countries in the world and been heavily influenced by habits of mostly housekeepers, to tell you the truth, women, and the diligence with which the kitchen is cleaned at night, and the tidy up that gets done. I mean, I can think of places in the world you wouldn't dream of leaving dirty dishes out overnight. And if you look at it at an energetic level, it's because you want to have it changes the frequency, right? Dirty and messy and chaos is low frequency, and clean is higher frequency. There's an invitation for God energy, right? And when I read Perry's comment, it's not just so everything is ready to go the next day. It raises the frequency. Often people come to me when they are stuck. And one of the best pieces of advice is, well, tell me about how energy moves in your home. Do you have clutter? Do you have stacks of things here and there? Can you move freely around your rooms? It really does. It really does matter. It helps so much. And then Heather says, energy transforms. It never ceases to be. Okay, let's get on to the barbed wire. Behind the back, to deter unwanted entry. So it's a protection of sorts. I know that Heather said something too. Protection and boundaries. And then Arya's commenting on what I was saying. Yeah. And in some countries or some places, you can't leave food out. If you leave food out, it's everything that Arya is saying here. And then somebody's going to argue, well, God is in the cockroaches too. Yes, God is in the cockroaches. You should listen to the Dalai Lama talk about mosquitoes. That's hilarious. So barbed wire protects. Barbed wire protects. I think in this, if this card came up, it hasn't for me so far in a reading, I would ask, are you keeping something in or are you keeping something out? Let's talk about that first. What does this card have to do with this card? You might come up with a prison association. And on some level, prisons do both. This is a really important discussion for people about protection, boundaries, and healthy boundaries. I think this card speaks. I mean, a picture speaks. What's this expression? A picture says 1,000 words or something. What about with the moon card? I think sometimes with moon energy, we are there's a bit of fear that arises, and I mean, my mind is going in lots of directions here. People often ask me about protection, spiritual protection, when we're doing this kind of work. And, Sadhana, have you ever been invaded by da 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 da? Or have you ever, what do you do when negative entities come into your space and things like that? It's such an interesting question for me because I do my best to keep the frequency so high that I can't say it's never happened, but that it doesn't happen. And I wonder if I can fit this in as well too. Trust. So I am a channel. I am a conduit. I am a messenger. I am a this stuff isn't from me, it's moving through me. And so I always have that visualization of everything moving through. There's no place for it to get stuck. It might come in, but it's going to go out. I don't know if this makes any sense to anybody who's listening, but these are really important and related discussions: justice and the barbed wire, moon and the barbed wire. And Heather, read Heather's comment here. Yeah. This fits in with this whole idea of 4 and 8 as well too. And 4, the danger of the 4 becoming the stagnant pond. We need to keep the energy flowing. And if you double that and think about the 8 and the potential for explosion. Thanks, Perry. Appreciate the confirmation. When I think about this 8 of Swords, 8 of Air, and I think about, okay, I'm going to go into the forest today and I'm going to do some journaling and some meditation. And I'm going to find a place to sit. And I'm going to put up some boundaries. So what are the boundaries I'm going to put up? I'm going to ask Spirit that hikers somehow find another way and don't cross my path. I'm going to ask that the whatever the insects are that are out at the time are going to be busy doing their own thing and are going to leave me alone. I'm going to ask for communion with nature. So it's like I'm setting up these boundaries for my own process to happen. It's not to put a lock and key around me, but it has to do with the efficacy of my work. And so I think as long as these protections are short term, great. And as long as you know why you're setting them up, they're not coming out of fear. They have a purpose. And so this is 8 of Air, right? 8 of Air, air, voice, mind, Yeah. And the changes of that. Really interesting correspondence between the Eight of Air and the Eight of Fire. Okay, and Eight of Pentacles is hard to see. It feels like a piece of jewelry, actually. Looks like a piece of jewelry. You know, it could be a one of those pounded brass like, to me, this looks like it is can I turn it like if it were on the wall this way? So then you've got the four directions and the, you know, like the northeast, northwest, the cardinal points and the ordinal points. It's interesting how it's set up this way. We have an X. We have an X in the center. What is at the center of this card? Honestly, I don't know. I can't see it. I don't remember if I read it. So I'm going to scan it, scan down. These pentacle cards, they're hard to see. I'm glad I can zoom in here. Let's see. 9, 8. The medallion in the center shows part of the illustration for the month of June from the medieval Book of Hours of the Duke of Berry. The beauty of the paintings and the harvesters combining in the meaning of this card. Adornment and added attractions to pull in our attention. Can we go back here? I was talking about this need for humility, and to me this feels more than it's not just a decoration on a wall. Like it has an important frequency, these 8 points. And if it were on my wall, I would align it a little differently. But there's something, you know, when I look at it this way, I'm just noticing it's got an X going this way and an X going that way, which is a really interesting shape. It's a mandala. It's a crossroads. It's a double crossroads. So what is significant about June? June is the 6th month. What is the Sabbath in June? Well, that is summer solstice. That's summer solstice. Does this not look like the sun? And it's rich, isn't it rich? Let's go to some of these comments here. This deck opens such windows in our souls and spiritual journey, also lends to our earthly lessons which we grow. We become part of the archetypal birth, death, and rebirth. And I am so fascinated at, yeah, of course it makes sense, Heather. I'm so fascinated how in this deck we're working with pieces of furniture. We're working with little corners of gardens. We're sitting there contemplating the barbed wire on the back fence. You know, it's like it's every part of this estate is significant. So what's a takeaway from this? Right? For me, this is about, wow, let's do this throughout the day when we have these moments of reflection, to sit and to slightly blur our focus and look into objects and furniture and honor their energy, to look into corners of gardens where there's more of a history, and imagine all who have wandered there before. I think this deck opens up tremendous insight. The 8 coins is a frame picture of medieval farm workers from a book of hours, with the addition of a heavily jeweled frame. So if I think about this card in terms of Waite-Smith, 8 of Pentacles, and the energy of 8 of Pentacles, the commitment to mastery, that heart and soul and crossover with Dharma that the 8 of Pentacles brings in for me. There's something here about the craft that for sure I can speak to in this card. Bye, Heather. Have a blessed evening. Thank you. Thank you all for your insights. Okay, so next week we'll do the 9s, and I will get creative with connecting the Hermit to other cards as well too. And then there's a bunch of cards that I haven't even looked at. So I'm not sure. We'll go next week with the 9s, and then I'll give it some thought about where we're going to go. But I have lots of ideas about comparing different rooms, and like I was saying, ornate tables like this. It'd be fun to look at things like that. So if you have other requests or ideas for card comparisons in this deck, please let me know. Be sure to come back and leave a comment, okay? Thank you all so much for your insight. Wonderful discussion tonight. Take good care. Namaste.